Okay, well, welcome everybody, and apologies for the delay here. I just do want to read, since this meeting is remote, I will read the notice appropriate for that. So pursuant to Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2022, this meeting will be conducted via remote means. Members of the public who wish to access the meeting may do so in the following manner, and that's by following the Zoom link that was published on the Capital Expenditures Planning Committee agenda, with a meeting ID of 987-1640-8045 with a passcode of 009373. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. Excuse me. In the event that we are unable to do so for reasons of economic hardship and despite best efforts, we'll post on the town's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. And just to note that, as we stated at the beginning of the meeting, that this meeting is being recorded. So with that, we don't have minutes to approve yet. So we'll turn now to the DPW for presentation of their capital requests. And again, Chris and team, thank you for your patience, but Chris, if you want to go ahead and share your screen now, that would be great.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for letting us speak to you tonight. As you can see on the screen, we've got a number of people here from our DPW team that contributed to the work you're going to see and the work we do. And, while we've put a lot into this, I think, and it's evolved over time, we welcome your feedback and we're looking forward to conversation. Let's pop the screen up here. So really two parts tonight. The first part, and I am cognizant of the time and the fact that there's other people waiting to present. So I'll get through this in a reasonable amount of time. So two parts. First part is really just an overview and to give you some perspective. Not necessarily a whole bunch of new information, some charts you've seen before, but also some evolution of things that we've talked about in the past. And the intent of that is just to show you that we are a learning organization and we're always trying to get better, and we're not kind of sitting at status quo. We're looking for ways to make things more efficient and better, and ultimately, in discussing tonight funding, that's going to benefit the town ideally. And then we'll talk about the capital plan request specifically. So this slide you've seen before. It's really about just a reminder of what we do, and the middle part of the slide is where we focus tonight. And that asset life cycle is really important when we're talking about capital projects, capital improvements. And I think the key takeaway here is just in red on the screen. There's a couple or three different studies that I'll briefly mention. And the point being that we've shown this slide a bunch of times over the last couple of years. And these studies inform the work we do and the discussions we have with you, and they're not stagnant. So the wastewater management plan that's been around for 20 years and in the middle of being updated, we started that last year. Culvert assessment, that's a new one. We just completed it this summer, looked at every culvert in town, over 200 of them. And now we have a report that tells us, here's our worst, here's our best, and a prioritization list that can tell us where we focus our efforts. So when we come to you for discussion about funding, we've actually got a resource that's data driven and some hard analysis that's been done to help us, make recommendations to you. The pavement management plan that update is happening right now. So looking at all the roads in town and then producing a report. This is done externally by a consultant that we'll hopefully get in December that gives us a recommendation on where we should focus our efforts in terms of spending money on roads. So the point here is that, we do lots of things on a routine basis, those essential services listed at the top, but really we're talking about long-term planning tonight, and that long-term planning is informed by a lot of hard work. You've seen this one as well, and it's not to pat ourselves on the back and say, look at all the stuff we manage. It's really about highlighting that there are a lot of things out there that we maintain and that are essential to the town. And if we can look at all of these things collectively and comprehensively, then, when we come ask for funding to support capital projects and we're doing things efficiently, we're synchronizing the work. So if we're going to dig up a road, we're also doing maybe things under the road and not having to come back later and dig that road up again to fix a pipe that we could have fixed, before we paved it, kind of thing. So that's the point in showing this, is that it's complex and we understand that. And we're looking for ways to part of our rationale for presenting things is to look for a way to do things once instead of, 3 times in the same spot. The other takeaway is the bottom of the slide, which is that, this list grows. So there are a number of areas that are in development right now across the town. And eventually those are just examples of roads at the bottom that eventually will become part of the town property. And so we'll take care of those roads, but also, all the pipes that are underground and the catch basins and detention basins and sidewalks, everything associated with those roads. And so this list here evolves over time, which I know you understand, but important for us all to say out loud. So when we talk about, us as DPW kind of looking at things and how we can do things better and come to you with information that's going to help you understand our needs and then make important decisions, we're talking about money and kind of the way our brain looks. This is kind of a dump from the DPW brain here. And if you look at funding in like these 3 tiers, so this is just a visualization. It's not something pulled from a book or some other source. It's something we're using to describe and help you visualize. So 3 tiers, tier A, B, and C. Tier A is what we do every day. That's our budget. Routine repairs, as it says, service contracts, fixing, plumbing issues or electrical issues. So think of your house, and at your house, you may have, pest control come out once a year. You might, have a service contract for your heating and air conditioning. You might have a plumber come out once in a while to fix a leaky toilet. So that sort of thing. Tier C, so at the kind of the other end of the spectrum, is major capital projects. So for us, that would be a renovation of a building or new construction. So taking it to maybe your house, that could be you're adding on a garage or going to remodel your kitchen. So not something you thought of today and you're going to do tomorrow. It's probably something you've been thinking about for a long time. There's been a lot of homework done to figure out how you're going to do it, how you're going to pay for it. It might need to be financed, and that's the same for us. So that's pretty, I think we all can kind of grasp that model there. So the middle is where it gets a little harder, and that's this tier B, as we've called it. So a lot of these repairs are too costly to pay for immediately out of our budget, but they're not necessarily large projects that you'd consider, as part of tier C. So examples there are furnace or fencing. So we have a furnace that goes out, might cost us $20,000 to fix it. And we can't just take 20 grand out of our budget and fix a furnace without having significant impacts to other things that we do. It's probably the same at a household where, you can do some of those routine things, tier A, that you budget for, like mowing your lawn or paying someone to plow your driveway. But when it comes to your hot water tank that goes out and that costs you 10 grand to replace it, you're probably going to do it, but it's going to hurt a little bit to do it. And you're probably going to, take something from somewhere else. Or there might be another thing in your house that you should do, but you're not going to do it just because you don't have the money readily available to do it, even though it's probably a smart thing to do. Right? So it could be sealing your driveway or something like that costs you maybe $10,000 or $15,000, but you kick it down the road, you defer it. And that's kind of where this term deferred maintenance that I'm sure you've heard of before. If we defer things, it's probably going to fall in this category. And these are items that we probably should be doing, but we might not be doing because we just we don't have the funding readily available. So how do we fix that? Well, you're gonna see in the next slide our capital plan and a suggestion or a recommendation or a thought on how we could potentially address that over time. So this is 2 slides here. This is the first slide. Lots of words on there, lots of numbers, but this is something that's evolved over the last couple of years, but this is what we submitted, what will be in the budget book as our capital plan for this year. And it spans 10 years. I know typically we talk 5, but we point out 10 just because it helps us kind of look things in a better way. So I'm not going to go through every line on this chart, but the intent here is to let you know we have a plan and it is long-term. And the idea is that, we as a town, these numbers here under each column for each year, we have some idea, and those numbers aren't exactly precise, but it gives us some ballpark of costs that we have, potentially to bear in the future for each of these segments of our plan. So I just referenced in the previous slide, there's kind of these tiers in this bucket, if you will, tier B. So that's an example that's captured here. So this building grounds capital maintenance. So this 50,000 that's spread over time is a way to potentially have the funding to tackle some of these things we need to do in a consistent and predictable way. And on the next slide where we see water and sewer, you'll see the same thing listed there. This chart here is listed primarily by building, and you can see over time things that we think need to be done to those buildings. I'll talk more specifically about vehicles in a few minutes, and then at the bottom of the chart is stormwater. So this MS4 compliance, that's something we've been doing routinely for the past couple of years. It relates to our stormwater permit that we have certain things we have to do. And then we've got some culvert work we need to do, and this is a specific one, but really what it means is over time, we're going to address each year a culvert. So we design it, whatever that solution is, then the following year we do something to actually correct it or build a new one. This is CMP, this is piping, drainage pipe, it's corrugated metal pipe. We have one of those studies that I referenced before. We've had this study for a little while now, but haven't done a whole lot with it yet, and we need to. And so this is projecting funding associated with taking on that task. And then this last item here is related to recharge. That's specifically about water. If you've been by the reservoir anytime recently, you've seen that reservoir is the volume of water in there has gone down significantly. And we've talked this before, but we pull water out of the reservoir, we pull water out of the ground, we send it to people's houses, it comes back through the sewer treatment plant, gets treated there. And once it's cleaned, it gets dumped in the Assabet River and then flows right out of town. And so we need to look at a way to harvest some of that water or stormwater and keep it in our town so we have this water to recharge aquifers, for the future. That is a very long-term process, but we need to start talking about it. So we've started talking about it over the past year. We've done some preliminary analysis associated with that, but more needs to be done, and that money that's allocated there gets us to the next step. And we're not going to get into the detail of that tonight, and potentially that's funded through a grant, but the point of me discussing it is just that I want to highlight that, there's a lot going on, and you can be confident that your DPW is, thinking not just about tomorrow, but really, 10, 15, 20 years ago down the road, and how we're going to, address potential shortfalls, or anticipate those shortfalls and figure out how to address them now so we don't have them in the future. This is water and sewer. These lists, I don't know, maybe they look short to you. But the the way to kind of mitigate that is, if you look here, water main design and construction. So basically we design something, we build it the following year, and we do that over, years, right? Because we've got 100 miles of water main, and eventually it's all going to be replaced over the course of decades. And so rather than list out every single type or every street or every pipe we're going to replace, the idea is just to, identify on this chart that we've got a path forward that is going to allow us to, on some predictable basis, design something, replace it, design something, replace it over time. And it's the same thing for sewer, whether it's pump stations or pipes, same sort of thought process in terms of designing and then replacing over time. So not entirely the focus for this evening, but I think helpful, hopefully, to give you a perspective on what we're looking at, big picture for the entire town and over the next decade. And these numbers here, give us, for our discussions with the town manager, with the finance director, with you, with other boards and committees, numbers to talk off of, so we can actually, think strategically and long-term about how we want to spend money and allocate resources over time. So that was part one. What we're going to dive into now is the specifics of what we're asking you for. So this is a summary of that, and then we'll go through each one. So we're talk about facility improvements, and then four charts on vehicles that we're looking at purchasing over the next year. So you can look at the numbers, but I'll go through each one anyways. So this is the first one, facility improvements. It kind of relates to that topic earlier that I discussed about this tier B. So that picture there, if you don't know what it is, it looks just like a blob, but it's our floor in our building, the building I'm sitting in right now. It's in really rough shape. It was laid over a concrete slab, and it's been there for about 20 years. There's a lot of water, and I won't call it mold because that makes people nervous, but it's not in good shape and needs to be replaced. So that's something we're proposing to replace this year, or this coming fiscal year. The Forbes parking. So behind the Forbes building, there's a carport for police vehicle parking, and we have a problem with ice melt in the winter. So water's draining off, and it's creating ice slicks back there. And regardless of the amount of salt and everything else we do to try and mitigate that slick, it's created dangerous conditions. And so we're trying to address that. And so we're in the process right now of getting an estimate through a structural engineer as to how we can address that. But we anticipate that cost, as it's shown here, about $35,000-ish to fix that issue. And then the third bullet there lists several items. And again, these are kind of those tier B items that are really too big to just take as big chunks out of our budget, but they're things we need to be doing. So at all those acronyms there, the Westboro Fire Department, EMS, Building Management System. So all of our big buildings have a system to manage them, to optimize the mechanicals inside those buildings. Well, the one at the fire department is pretty dated. I'm not an IT guy, but Windows XP is pretty old, and that's what that system's running on right now. And so we need to spend some money to update that building management system. It's a one-time investment over a series of investments. So $9,000 gets us part of the way, but we would do it incrementally, and we would update that system in that building to get it equivalent to other buildings in the town. We haven't done it. It should be done, in my opinion. Is it a showstopper if we don't do it right now? No, but the whole idea behind a building management system is to help your system run efficiently, which is going to ideally save you money and potentially energy, and relate that to, climate impacts. So it should be done. The DPW entrance gate, another example of something where, the gate periodically doesn't work and open and close properly, but we've gotten by, but we should fix it. The switch gear is another example. That's in each building. Each building needs to be looked at and properly maintained. That's a cost. So all of those things bundled together is that 145. And we're suggesting that this be one of the capital projects you support so we can tackle some of these items. I won't go into a whole lot of detail here because I know you've all seen this a few times, but a reminder, this is our fleet, and all of these vehicles pictures here represent various aspects of our fleet, and they all have unique purposes. But we've had a pretty consistent program over the last 3 years to programmatically replace vehicles. And this is the chart we've traditionally shown. And I think the important thing here to highlight is that, in this chart, green is good and red is not good. But based on the vehicles that we have ordered this year, so approved in March at March town meeting in 2022, those vehicles are in order. And assuming we order these vehicles that we're requesting tonight, then this chart over the course of about 4 years has gone from predominantly red to predominantly green. So most of these reds will turn green. So what that means is we've now brought our fleet into a state where it's just sustainment after that. It's strategic replacement of vehicles over time so that we can keep it all in a good condition. We're not investing, significant sums of money to maintain stuff that is outdated or doesn't work properly or is not safe or not efficient. So we've done that about 4 vehicles every year over the last 3 years. And it's been, I think, very successful for us and kind of turned this chart in the direction we needed to go. And then you can see we've got, projections for future years, but really after this year, assuming we fund the purchases we've asked for this year, we've kind of crossed the hump and really gotten to a good point in terms of the state of our vehicle fleet. So this is one of the trucks we're asking to replace. You can see the picture of it, a representation of it. It's 25 years old. We just invested about 15 grand in this truck in the last month or so to prepare it for winter. There's a variety of ways, as we've discussed before, to look at vehicles and categorize them and decide how to replace them. A lot of times it's based on mileage or hours of service. But in the case of our vehicles, the easiest thing to do is just look at the age. And when we're talking about something that was made in 1999, it's time for that thing to get replaced. And especially operating under the conditions it does, exposed to the salt and the snow and everything else, it needs to be replaced. And this is our recommendation for the next one. This is our electrician's truck. If it kind of looks like the Verizon truck you might see in your neighborhood, that's because it probably was at one point. It's not specifically an electrician's truck. It served its purpose over the time we've had it, but it's time to replace it and replace it with a truck that's properly insulated and has the appropriate equipment that can be utilized by our electrician. We're pretty fortunate to have a very talented electrician who does a lot of stuff in-house for us that we don't have to contract out. But this truck is part of that work he does, and it's now 20 years old and time to replace it. We're asking for 2 vehicles, 2 admin vehicles. They both look exactly like this one. We have 2 of them. One of them has been parked for about 2 months now because the front axle fell out of it, and it's not worth spending the money to replace it. So it's been parked. We want to replace it. The cost there is $40,000. That 40,000 is not, we're not getting two vehicles, and they're going to look like something like this. You're going to be an all-wheel drive vehicle. They're not going to cost 20 grand a piece, but we do have some other funding that we're going to add to this funding of 40,000 to allow us to purchase two vehicles. Right now, we're planning to buy hybrid vehicles. We have looked at and discussed electric vehicles or plug-in electric vehicles. And we're certainly open to that, but the cost is significantly higher. Not quite double, but higher. And so our recommendation is a hybrid, but if there's a interest by the town to pursue specifically an electric or something like that, then we could consider that. But that's just gonna be a higher cost, and that's why we went with the hybrid. And this is the last chart. It's a chipper, which may not seem like that big of a thing, but it's a significant piece of equipment that is out every single day somewhere in this town. This one is from 1990, so it gave the town a whole bunch of service, but it's time to replace it. We just invested $1,000 in it last month. We have a second chipper that's newer that we invested about $10,000 in. So these things are pretty dated. It's time to get a new one. We would replace this one, which is our older one. Our other chipper would become kind of the backup, or at times we send both of them out depending on what's going on. But this is a essential piece of equipment for us, and it's time to get a new one. So I feel like I sped through that, but I am aware that other people are waiting, and I know you may have questions. So that's where I'll stop, and then happy to go back or discuss anything you want to discuss.
Great. Thanks, Chris. To the committee members, any questions for Chris on any of those items?
Hi, Chris. This is Andrew Bradley. So one of the questions I have is that when you're walking through the different elements of the different high-level, like 5 to 10-year plans that you had, there were a number of instances you had where there were charges that were going to be recurring, like $50,000 every 2 years. And the one that actually also jumped out at me was, I think it's like $25,000, maybe it was $30,000 for maintenance every year. My question, yeah, there we go, water system maintenance. Could you talk to me about what the thinking is between when something is $50,000 every year and it's maintenance, which to me doesn't really sound like a capital expense, and then maybe it's just the way I'm reading this. How is it that you look at these recurring ongoing charges as something that isn't part of your regular budget, but should be part of a capital appropriation or a capital ask?
So I'll just use that water system, this one here that you just referenced, as the example. So we have, as an example, water valves. So valves that are in the pipe network around the town. There are thousands of these valves around the town. And so when there's a water break, we have to go out and turn these valves off to stop the water, and then we fix the pipe and then turn the water back on. And we have valves that are not functioning properly and need to be fixed. That's not something we can do internally with our capability. We would hire somebody out. So we've recently established contracts that allow us to hire somebody immediately, whether it's for an emergency or scheduled work, water and sewer and stormwater, to do work. And so now we have the contract mechanism in place. We need the funding to actually do the work. And to replace a valve is not typically it would be efficient to bundle this work. So say do 4 or 5 valves together in various places around the town and hire someone. He goes out and hammers them all out, and it costs you $40,000 or whatever the cost is. So that is a capital asset, like that valve, because once you fix it, it's going to be there for the next 20, 30 years. But we don't have that money that's just sitting in our budget every year to do that work. So we're suggesting that one way to address that is to allocate a bucket of money, lack of a better word, to be able to go chip away at these valves as an example, but there's other things we need to do that would allow us to address these capital assets. But we're not going to come ask, well, I don't want to come ask you for $10,000 to fix one. Because the cost isn't like all the contracting and the work associated with getting somebody on board to do that. It makes more sense to do several at a time and have a predictable process for doing it over time, meaning over years. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's our thought process.
No, I appreciate that, and I'll have to say I never questioned the legitimacy of the work. It was really sometimes things are budgeted as being part of your budget, and sometimes that they're capital asks. And I suppose that the word maintenance there struck me as something that wasn't the capital asset, and I see how you're tying it back there. And maybe this something similar applies to the other elements that were being like recurring costs that were fixed over time. Those are just capital replacements that are being bundled sort of in a recurring timely element. And it actually got me thinking about another project that your predecessor used to do. On an annual basis, they would go to town meeting and ask for $30,000 to replace, I forget if it was 10 or 20 fire hydrants, with the idea that, on an ongoing annual basis, all the fire hydrants would eventually be switched out of town. And I realized the last time we did that, and I did some research, was in 2019. I think that's the switch over to you. Is that work happening under another element or somewhere else in your budget? Or is that something that's being put off and will become a larger ask at some point in the future?
That work is being done. Basically it was rolled into the operations budget. So instead of going every year and asking for that sum of money, a decision was made to roll that into the budget. And so that's where that money, so yes, it still happens. It's just not accounted for through an article. It's accounted through our budget. The challenge though is not specifically with hydrants, but just in general, is if we come to you and say, well, let's just add 50,000 to our budget and do the things that that we just discussed, the challenge becomes our budget ends in June, right in the middle of summer, which is the construction season. And so we might ask for $50,000. And so we raise that money, through taxes or whatever. But because of scheduling and other things, we may not actually get it done by June 30th. So then that money just, isn't spent essentially, and it goes away. And then we have to ask for it again for the following year to try and do that again. Whereas if we have something a little more consistent and predictable like this, that's not necessarily tied to an expiration date, then we can use it more efficiently.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. You just answered my question, so that was great. Lisa, I see your hand up.
Yeah, this question is sort of for Kim because it has to do with the summary, the capital summary that matches the pages we got. But the buildings, grounds, parking shelter, like the total we were given was 145.5, but the three line items are 50, 80, and 200. So just can we have updated numbers for just where it splits off the windows? Because I guess the windows are included in one of the lines under fiscal 24.
Right. We'll make sure that what you see mirrors how it was laid out last year in the budget document, where even if we've identified another funding source, that gets included so that all of the numbers tie out.
Yeah, it's just this number is different.
Okay. Yep, we'll go back through and make sure everything ties out.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I have a comment. Could we go back to one of the first slides where you had allocated the fiscal year 24 numbers in terms of the budget source, free cash versus other stuff, I think.
Just tell me what you,
Just,
Yeah, there was a slide that, yeah, I guess we're getting there.
Oh,
Yeah,
this one.
okay. So this column, 495,000, in effect is assumed to be free cash. And I guess the only comment I would make is that to the extent that we have anything that becomes free cash, in effect, it's being paid for by every taxpayer of the town, versus things that are in the water enterprise, i.e. water or sewer, are actually being paid for by the users of whatever facility it is. And therefore, it doesn't hit every taxpayer in the sense that a general fund charge would. But if it's paid for out of the water enterprise or sewer enterprise fund, then it becomes specifically to the funding of those, which is not everybody. And I think that is a difference between, the idea of a capital expenditure being paid for a la free cash versus something that belongs in the water enterprise or sewer enterprise fund. I mean, I don't see much difference between the argument of fire hydrants being in an annual budget versus water main valves not. So I think in my own mind, I'm not sure that I agree with the logic that got the water main valves in a capital project versus fire hydrant replacement part of a budget cost. So those are just something to think about, I guess, when we get to worry about how we're going to pay for all this stuff.
okay, other questions?
Ian, can I just clarify? I'm not sure. Steve, the projects are allocated. I just want to be clear, and maybe that's what you were saying, but where DPW has a piece of equipment that is used by water and or sewer, it will allocate a proportionate portion of it will allocate it across water, sewer, enterprise, as well as general fund. That does happen.
Yeah, okay. So to the extent that the specific discussion on replacement of water valves, quote unquote, being capital, again, it just matters where the money comes from to pay for it. If it, because they're water valves and they come out of the water enterprise fund, then I don't have any argument with what we're talking about.
I assume, Chris, that's where it, I mean, that's where it was
Yeah.
in that other chart. It would be coming out of the water enterprise fund.
correct,
Right.
yes.
Thank you.
Andrew, I see your hand raised.
Thank you. So, Chris, there was some work there's a number of vehicles that the rec department has that are very unique to rec department with regards to managing the golf course. But there's one piece in particular that they're looking to replace that is actually a tractor of some sort. It's not a huge tractor. It's much smaller for their purposes. I've suggested there's an opportunity for them to connect with you because there may be a year-round use for a piece of equipment like that where you could use it in the off-season in a way that they couldn't. And I don't know, shoveling salt, moving something around. But additionally, you guys may be very well connected in terms of knowing and having access to where best to get this sort of kind of equipment, which isn't a super golf-specific piece of equipment. Does that sort of a conversation seem like one that makes sense to have to take place, or should I just let it go and let them do their own thing with their own tractor?
There's certainly no harm in us having a conversation about it. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of, I don't maintain golf courses, but I know there's some, and I don't play golf, but I know there's some unique aspects of how you maintain a golf course and the type of equipment you use. So I don't know specifically what piece of equipment you're talking about and kind of what the capabilities are, but I certainly no harm in us having a conversation with them and making sure that there's not an opportunity there that's being missed.
I
So
appreciate that. I'll
we'll do
follow
that.
up with them. Thank you.
Yeah.
And like I say, there are things that are very specifically them that I don't think make sense for the conversation. But tractor seems kind of in the wheel well of a lot of things you guys do. So thank you. I'll see if I can restoke that conversation.
Great. Any other questions?
Is it appropriate for me to ask a question, not on the committee?
Sure.
Chris, you mentioned a couple of admin vehicles and the hybrids. What's the make, or maybe provide me offline the make and model and kind of are these just Explorer trucks or SUVs?
Yeah, I can I can send you the details. But they're vehicles off of state contracts. And we try to stick to the, similar brands for parts and all that stuff, but yes, we
Ford.
can.
Fords and stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
No, just send me offline and I'll take a look, see if there's I have any input in that. And is the deck going to be available after the meeting?
Yeah, Kim, I don't know if you sent it out or if it's posted somewhere, but I'll provide it.
We don't usually post it, but it is a public document. So yeah, we can certainly.
If you could send that, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Pete. Chris, anything further? You have other stuff?
Nope, that's all we had. Appreciate your time and looking forward to continuing the discussion.
Okay. Great, thank you very much. Thanks to all of you. Okay. Come back to our agenda. The next thing we had on there was Council on Aging. Was there anything?
I can just briefly speak to that. You haven't seen a project detail sheet. We don't have one yet. The Council on Aging has 3 vans or minibuses that they use to provide service to seniors for medical appointments, shopping trips, various things, bringing seniors to programs. Those are on a replacement schedule, and the Council on Aging has funds available. It was actually a donation to the senior center for the specific purpose of providing transportation in vans. We're working to identify when one of the current vans would need to be replaced. The cost is roughly $80,000 to $85,000 for a 10-person van. We have 2 that are actually out for repair right now. So we're just trying to figure out when we need to slot this in. And unfortunately, just the way timing worked out, trying to get the quote. Unfortunately, it is a bigger size vehicle, so we're experiencing some of the similar issues that you've heard from other departments in terms of delay, trying to get firm pricing. So I don't have anything specific for you tonight, but I have given Alma a heads up that we're pretty much out of time to get it into the plan for this year. I'll keep you all posted.
Okay, so Kim, just so I understand if I heard you correctly, though, this is, while we're putting it in there because we're putting everything in, there is funding available. So this is not looking for free cash or anything else with that.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
We still want to
So
reflect it, but
exactly.
yeah.
It's not something you've typically seen in the past because it has that outside funding source. But again, we're trying to pull everything that fits the capital definition into the plan.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. Okay, next then is the B-Walt Trail Development presentation. So Christy, I think you're on for that. And for the committee, this was, as Kim mentioned, this was one we got later than the original package. We got that today. Or later on this evening.
I think she was juggling multiple meetings tonight.
Okay. Um,
Do you want to jump ahead to fire?
yeah, I will jump ahead to Chief Purcell then. Chief, thank you for being here.
You're welcome. Good evening, everyone. Oh, Christy's back. You want to go, Christy? I can wait. You sure? You were up. We were just filling in because we thought you went somewhere else. But you can go.
No, it's all right. Go ahead. I'll
Okay.
listen to you.
So good evening, everyone. Thanks, Patrick Purcell, serving as your fire chief here in the town of Westboro. So my capital expenditure plan that was submitted for the year includes two additions this year that were unforeseen in previous years, and we've kind of moved them ahead as higher priority items. And well, the first one would be a security system upgrade for our department. So as you know, we house the not only the fire department, emergency management, EMS, we have the public safety communications center in that building as well. And that really is the nucleus of public safety in Westboro. Nothing really happens without going through that room. It is a 911 public safety answering point. A lot of protected information in that center, statutorily protected information, and some high-tech infrastructure that help them with police and fire jobs. Over the last year, we've had some challenges with security, and you might have seen us on the news where we had someone smash in the front doors trying to get into the dispatchers in the middle of the night. That was preceded by someone breaking into vehicles in the parking lot for over an hour. When the fire station was built in 2014, there was a bare bones minimum security camera system that was installed that is outdated. We had it evaluated since the last incident where someone smashed the doors in, and we didn't even actually get any of that vandalism on video. The only footage we have was that of police body cameras when they apprehended the person that did that. Since that time, we've had contacted a company that the town has used in the past, primarily with the Forbes building. They've also done some access control work, which police and the schools utilize. And we're looking, so the project that we're looking for before you tonight is to replace the existing camera system that's in that building and update our access control so that we don't have to carry multiple swipe cards around. And I'll paint a picture for you. So the police officers carry a swipe card where if there's an emergency and they need to gain access to the school, they can swipe and access that building without getting buzzed in. The fire department, on the other hand, does not have that swipe card. We have a different one that we use for our own building only, and we're looking to switch over and get on the same system as the rest of the towns that have access control right now. So the 91,608 is for replacement of security cameras and for updating the access control for our building. The second request was for the diesel exhaust system replacement. So if you've been into the fire station, you've probably seen 23 yellow hoses hanging from the ceiling that connect to the exhaust pipe of every vehicle, either by an air-controlled system or by magnet. That system was installed prior to me working in the town of Westboro in the old station and moved over to the new station when we moved in. We pay a lot of money in upkeep annually. Sometimes when the air system fails or the pressure changes in the system, it doesn't release, and we rip the hose apart. That's about a $2,000 repair every time we do that. We've tried to modify and switch over to a magnet system instead of the air system. And what that did is, particularly on the ambulances, put us in a position where when you're back into a loading dock at the hospital and the rear end, this air ride drops down, it crushes that system at a tune of about $2,000 for every repair. So there is a far better technology out there that we have researched and we've gotten quoted. And being that the system is now pushing 25 years old, we were looking to update that. And the diesel exhaust is a piece of equipment that is essential in a fire station. Without having it, it would be contribute to long-term negative health effects on firefighters. And the overall equipment is about $57,000 and change, and the balance would go towards installation and electrical work. For fiscal year 25, I'm sorry, I'm going to back up a little bit. Originally, we were on the plan this year to replace the department's forestry vehicle. You'll see in the fiscal year 20, we bumped that up to fiscal year 25. I feel that's a piece of equipment that we can hold on to. It will eventually need to be replaced. We purchased that just prior to me becoming chief from the town of Northborough. It was a used vehicle that we bought for around $10,000, but it has low mileage, and frankly, it has an old emissions system on it that is problem-free, unlike the rest of our fleet that has the newer diesel exhaust systems in it, and they're all broken, and we can't get replacement parts for them right now. Literally every check engine light is on in almost our entire fleet. That vehicle only has about 25,000 miles on it. Public Works did a great job restoring it when we purchased it. It doesn't have any rot, so we're going to bump that up and play year by year and try to be as responsible as we can, keeping that as part of our fleet. Also in fiscal year 25, we have an ambulance. We have bumped up that up a year. And that's primarily for what you've heard from me for the last two meetings when I've come before you with regard to supply issues. So we were approved, well, I can tell you that ordering an ambulance right now, we're looking at a minimum of a 2-year delivery time. We are used to 7 months. So we're looking to get this moved up on the plan, order it early, and probably expect delivery at the same time we would have expected it prior to supply issues. Also in the capital plan for fiscal year 25, I'm not sure when we would be looking at moving forward with a substation. I could tell you that it's been a work in progress for me for years. Trying to find land has been difficult, and I know you have a lot of other large purchases, procurements, or projects you have to decide on moving forward. But I do want to have this before you so that it's on your radar that we do need a satellite fire station. We do need it to be on the east side of town. I am doing my very best to try to do this through mitigation or any other means I can to keep costs down. I know we are not ready to pull the trigger on it yet, but I do want it before you so that it's not a surprise when we get there. And we've been talking about this for over 5 years now, 4 years, since 2018. Moving to fiscal year 26. We were originally on the fiscal 25 docket for communications infrastructure improvements. We were fortunate to be afforded ARPA money for some of those projects, specifically the radio towers in our town with our receivers and our transmitters, and some site assessments to see where we are at. A combination of things has happened. There's been some supply issues getting that project going. So even if you afforded the money next year for the balance of the project, I'm not sure we could get it done, to be quite honest. We're managing a lot of large projects that have been carried over. And the second thing is I'm trying to watch what's going on with the Regional Emergency Communications Center, because if that actually came to fruition, then that request for those dollars would essentially go away. So I think pushing that up ahead, but also keeping it on your radar at the same time would be in our best interest. In fiscal year 26, we have a request for a water rescue vehicle. Currently, we don't do a lot of water type incidents in town, but when we do, they're labeled what we call low frequency, high risk. And a lot of the outcomes of those scenarios have a lot to do with how prepared that we are as a department. And I'll give you an example. If we have a person that has submerged underwater and require intervention by scuba divers, it is impossible to put scuba gear on in the back of a fire truck. However, we have right now a 2004 ambulance that we did some work on in 2009 to retrofit the back of that. That allows us to do that, but that vehicle is definitely near the end of its life. It's 18 years old, and 18 years old, a lot of mechanical problems, a lot of corrosion problems, and we're not really using it for what it was designed for. So moving forward, we'll be looking for something like a Sprinter van type vehicle that's outfitted the correct way in the back so that we can ready ourselves en route to calls so we can hopefully perform a rescue and not a recovery. I would say that even though we don't do a lot of those calls, we do some calls every year. I would say in the average of 4 to 5, and they are usually, like I said at the beginning, low frequency, but very high risk, not only for civilians, but for us as well. In fiscal year 27, we'd be looking to replace a utility vehicle. The fire prevention vehicle will then be 12 years old. I'm projecting out, I don't have any mechanical problems right now, but I'm projecting out 4 or 5 years that we'll anticipate some problems by then, just knowing how we cycle our vehicles and how long they last. And I think that's just about it. And fiscal year 28, an ambulance once again. And I'd just like to comment on the ambulances. We generate revenue by doing ambulance calls, and that technically we have an EMS or ambulance reserved receipts account that some money goes into to fund these projects. I will be requesting in the very near future that we pull more money out of that revenue and put it into that fund because of the escalating costs of equipment and apparatus. So that we don't have to burden the capital plan, and we can fund specifically from that account going forward.
Great, thank you, Chief.
That's it. You have any questions?
Yeah. Kim, you raised your hand there.
I just want to make sure. So there was an update on the funding request related to that first item, the Plymouth, the diesel exhaust system. So the worksheet that I sent to you over the weekend has two $57,000 requests in that, and that will actually be updated. Pat,
Yeah,
do you have
sure, I'll speak on that. So I made a mistake. I don't know why I put the 57,000 on the FY27. Originally, when I was speccing out the equipment, I think that the vendor was under the impression he was selling us equipment only and shipping it to a fire station that was under construction to be installed by a general contractor. When I called him back on Friday, because it seemed like not a lot of money for what we were buying, he confirmed that my suspicion that was not. For the installation, we asked for 40 just to cover us if we went over, but I would certainly do the responsible thing. If something abnormal came up and it went much higher than we were asking for, then I would certainly table this for another year. I would like to not, because of the amount of money that we put into the existing system. The new one doesn't have any hoses. It's like a state-of-the-art one that hovers about 12 feet in the air and takes very little maintenance. We have to change the filters in it twice a year, and that's it. No more hoses.
Great, thanks for that. Kim, thanks for bringing it up. Andrew, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chief. The first question is with regards to the $90,000 funding for the $91,000 for the equipment for the cameras. Can I confirm that that's going to include any of the back-end systems like servers for disk space and all of the contracts? And as a second part to that question, does expanding any of that infrastructure, will that have an impact on your regular budget as well for whatever costs may come up, recurring costs based upon whatever you're planning on additionally for the security system?
So the answer is yes. It includes the server, it includes the software, it includes the upgrades and the licensing, not only for the fire department, but this is part of a bigger project to protect a lot of the town's infrastructure, which I'm part of a team that's been looking at. We've been, we're designing a system, and you'll probably hear more about it as we go forward in time, so that we don't get halfway done a project and find out what we've designed isn't big enough for what we're trying to design and trying to do and accomplish, and we come back looking for money and waste money. We're trying to put a big, we have ourselves in the building and grounds, public works, town manager. We've all sat down with a vendor, and the vendor is known to Westboro for doing work here. And we're trying to be really smart about the way we spend the money and be the most efficient with its use, not only with purchasing equipment, but as another example, the cameras in the fire station, just because they're obsolete and they don't work for the fire station and the dispatch center, doesn't mean that they don't work. So perhaps we can remove some of that infrastructure and place them in places that are they're more suitable for, like a sewer pumping station, like a water station. Like we have all that infrastructure that's not supervised right now at all. So that money would also include removing that and then building that equipment back into a bigger plan. Second question was, there's a cost that goes with everything. We pay money now to support our camera system, and I don't know what the future cost would be going forward, but it's from what I understand, around the same cost out of the budget.
That's great. Thank you. The other question I had, and it's more just a suggestion because we're still 3 years out on the water vehicle, is something that you have pioneered, really done a fantastic job of, and I know the police actually has done it with things like K9 unit for something that is a very low use and specifically very high risk. I wonder if there's an opportunity to think about a regional way to use this for other areas as well, that would help defray costs potentially. Whether it was a cost-sharing measure or a pay-per-use by other towns if it came to be valuable. But just a thought, especially for something that's not going to be used very often. Thanks.
You want me to comment on that? So the place where we get money to purchase regional equipment has a moratorium on vehicles. What they did do for us was they replaced our boat and our trailer. They replaced our dive equipment, which you've seen almost none of that come before you, and some of our water rescue equipment, which we do use on a regional basis with other communities. And we all are assessed, because I take advantage of resources from other communities. We all do pool our money so that there aren't 45 scuba divers in Westboro. We have 9, and Hopkinton has 8, and Marlboro has 12. We do pool our resources, in the way that we fund that specialty team is through our annual dues to Massachusetts Fire District 14. That dues is running about $4,000 annually, and based on that, we pool our resources with 23 other cities and towns. So we do that now.
That's great. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay. Other questions for Pat? Okay. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Have a great night.
You too. Okay, Christy. Unless we lost her again. Nope, we
No,
got you.
I'm here.
Okay. So B-Wall.
So I'm presenting to you on the B-Wall Trail, the Boston Worcester Airline Trail. This is a project that we're all very familiar with, that has been being worked on for several years. And in 2019, we got a grant to do a feasibility study, which was updated and finalized to address some concerns of different committees. And it was accepted by the board in 2021. So I'm going to share my screen. So it was, so this is the map to show the trail. You can see that it's segmented. So there's 6 different segments to the trail, with the 6th one being the line that goes up to Northborough. Once the board accepted the feasibility study, they had asked me to work on an implementation plan. So I worked with our town planner, our community development director, DPW director, liaison to the ATSC from the select board, Shelby Marshall, and then 2 members of the select board, Julie Squires and Don Byrne, to look at how we might fund this going forward, and if we were interested in doing a full, doing the whole trail at one time, or if we wanted to pursue a segmented approach. So I know Jim Robbins and I believe Don Byrne came to you last year to talk about how this was going to come to you at some point. What we did, it was in August, we presented an implementation plan that favored the segmented approach. That was something that we learned from talking to some other communities about how they had moved forward with similar trail projects. So segmented approach means a couple different things. One is that we would pursue these different sections one at a time. It also means that we might have opportunities to obtain access or build a section of trail that may or may not be connected. But we were encouraged that that's something that would really be important, is to take advantage of those opportunities, even if they're not necessarily the segment that we're working on. So that was the approach they brought forward. Our intention is to not at this time ask much for town money. We really intend to pursue grants, possible TIP funding, other different opportunities. So an example of that is the segment 1, which is along Otis Street, is actually incorporated into the Otis Street Route 9 corridor project, where we recently were awarded a MassWorks grant, as well as funding from MassDOT to pursue that project. And so we sort of feel like segment 1 is moving forward again, with no town dollars except for a $250,000 match, and this is a $6 million project. So as that's moving forward with construction over the next year or two, we're pursuing the section 2. We feel that they're in a priority order, and so our next task will be to apply for the Mass Trails grant, which is due on February 1st of 2023. And we'll be applying for a 25% design. So in your request sheets, you'll see that total amount in FY24, that's a total amount of design. We'll only be requesting a portion of that for 25% design through the Mass Trails grant. There is an 80-20 split on that, where 20% would have to be funded by the town or donated in kind. So we're still working through what that amount would be, but there is about $100,000 currently in articles related to the BWALT. And so at this time, we're not asking for any specific money, but it is certainly a capital project that we want this committee to be aware of. And then you also see a $3 million construction in FY24, and that's related to that phase 1. So again, no money being asked for from the town. That number came out of the spreadsheets that we use through the state to estimate cost of construction, but really just understanding that construction in segment 1 is incorporated into that project that's being funded at this point by the state. So we just wanted to make you aware of it. Our plan is to move forward with in one fiscal year pursuing grants for 25% design, in the following year completing the design, and then the year after that working towards construction. And so that's one piece of it. If you look at the implementation plan, another important piece of this project is obtaining easements. So really not sort of part of the capital piece of this, but just important to understand that we do need to pursue easement acquisition. And we're working with the Central Mass Planning Commission to synthesize the feasibility study, which is a very long document, and help us put together a community-wide meeting that we would hold in early 2023 to start talking about potential easement acquisition along this conceptual route. So that's really where we're at. Again, not currently asking for any money from a town fund, but, you know, certainly a capital project.
Great, thanks, Christy. Any questions from the committee members? Thank you for the update and
Sure.
that. So when I first saw that number for 2024, I forgot about the Otis Street. We were combining in that and then you scared me, so that's good.
Yeah. I should probably add that this was a priority of the 2018 strategic plan, and it's also a priority in the master plan, which is included in your information, but it's important to note.
Great, thank you.
Yeah,
Any other questions? Okay,
thanks.
thank you.
Okay,
Good job.
bye.
Okay, so moving forward on our agenda then, discussion of capital requests and next steps. Kim, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Okay. So at this point, you have heard from all of the departments. There is one project I wanted to point out. Last year's capital requests included funding for the open space to replenish the open space fund. When I had conversations earlier this year about continuing that request with Mark Silverberg, the expectation was if the Community Preservation Act was approved and passed at the ballot, that they would pull back on that for the time being, as they identified CPA as a potential funding source for some of the work that they do. So just if anybody's tracking what was in the plan last year, what isn't showing up this year, that was based on that conversation. So at this point, you've heard all of the presentations. I do owe you a couple of updates. I did receive this afternoon an updated spreadsheet from the schools based on our conversation on Thursday night, pulling out some design and feasibility work and shifting some things around, as well as adding in the anticipated $5 million for the Hastings for the project in FY24. So I just, that came in late this afternoon. I will plug that into the format that we're using. And within the next couple of days, my intention is to get you an Excel file that summarizes all of the asks for the 5-year plan. And then what you've used in the past is I pull out the funding requests for FY24. So that's our capital budget, and identify the very specific funding source. So you can see exactly what's coming from free cash, from the enterprise accounts, as well as then some of the other places where we've identified other, which in, you know, the example that Christy just gave, that's part of another project. So you'll see exactly what the funding sources are, and you can begin your review using our evaluation criteria. So any questions on that?
Kim, not on that, but I did have a question back. I should have asked it when Chris was here with DPW, but I noticed things on, and he might have said this and I missed it. If I did, I apologize. But there were things on the materials that you had sent to us that weren't discussed for, that are in there for fiscal year 24. I just wanted to, so one was being kind of the country club renovations, and I know there's a building assessment study going on, but is that a fiscal year 24 item or?
Yeah, Ian, I had the same question. I felt like when he said, "Oh, I'm done. Are there any questions?" Like I thought then he was going to move on to that next section, and then he was gone, and I was like, "Wait, did I miss what we were doing?"
I should have spoke up. You should have spoke up. That was the same way. I'm like, wait a
exactly.
minute.
Maybe I can get him back. I
Well-
can see if I can get him back. So at this point, I don't know if that was intended as a placeholder. The expectation is that between now and town meeting, the building evaluations that are underway will be completed. And I believe their intent was to have funds to start working on some of the issues that are identified in those studies. I do think the challenge here is that this isn't a model we don't typically set money aside or approve money without knowing specifically what it is going to. That I think it was a more general. I can certainly try to get more information and pass that on to you. And then if we need to ask him back to talk to us a bit more, I'm happy to do that as well.
Yeah, if you could If you could do that, that'd be great. I don't know that we need to try to call him back right now, but I think there were, a couple things on there. That,
Yeah, well, there was
the
even the thing,
forms-
the stormwater, even the stormwater work, the recharge, like there are entries there for 24, and I'm not clear if we're supposed to consider them not having heard anything.
So let me talk to Chris. So this is where, as we work through the process, you're seeing things. Some of them are new. So stormwater is relatively new. Those are expenses we haven't work that hasn't been done in the past.
Mhm.
And we're also developing an approach to how some of that work would be funded in the future, i.e. through a enterprise fund, a stormwater utility. We haven't set that up yet, but that is an option. So the question is, I know right now he's working to identify some grants and other funding source, but he's got one of those stormwater requests for FY24 is a pretty hefty number. And he certainly is clear and does not have an expectation that that would come from free cash.
And I mean, I have like 6, I'm counting how many pages that I printed out of things that are filed under 24 that we didn't hear about. And I think I'm up to 10.
Okay.
Including, I mean, I have urgent Sandra Pond dam repairs, 325,000. Wilkinson well connection, 325,000. PFAS treatment, $6.4 million. Again, even if it's here split between water and water enterprise and something else, like, are we supposed to know about this so that we say we're good with how this is going?
Right. Yes. Let me talk with Chris and
we may need him. Yeah, we may need him back just to go through them quickly. Unfortunately.
And again, this is where, as this evolves, I think we're going to have some conversation around the feedback that comes from the committee when it's related to projects that are coming out of enterprise funds. I know we've pulled those in, and that's not how it's been traditionally done. So is it almost, are there two tiers of review that the committee does? Is there one that's around free cash and potentially some non-enterprise type of funding sources? I think that's, as we've pulled all of this information together and are looking at all of these projects with all of these funding sources, those are some of the questions that are now coming up. How do you evaluate different types of projects?
Yeah, I think evaluation's key. I think, also though, just for us and then, the public hearing it. And I think that's part of our goal, as you said, is to get everything out there. I think it's good for us just to hear about it as a committee and to, ask questions and just make sure that we're there. Cause like the other one on there, and Lisa, thanks for bringing it up. And I should have said it. I should have asked the question.
Well, we both should have, but whatever.
But like the Otis Street one, I'm assuming that's what we've been talking about. This is the money. I'm assuming that is the money that we've received from the state, and that's why it wasn't talked through. But in some ways, it probably should have just been highlighted that that's what that was, and that was the core.
I mean, I think if we think of the paradigm that we've set up with the country club, right? They're now, I mean, they're a revolving fund, and they're still asking us to basically bless how they wish to spend their money. So is that really? If that isn't part of our job, then the country club can go run themselves and be happy they don't have to talk to us maybe. But if it is part of our job, then I don't want to miss anything.
Right.
And I think that's what we have to give some thought to, because some of those bigger projects, for instance, the Mass Works project, the Otis Street corridor, all of that has been a priority. It's been before a number of other boards and committees. And as we move into it, I think it's appropriate that it gets recognized as capital work being done, but does it look differently? Do we have another section in the plan that identifies some of these projects that, they're not things that it's just come through the department and they're moving forward with it, but they've been through these other processes as well. So maybe that's another way to think about it too. but I will have a conversation with Chris and I will reach back out. And if we need to have him back, maybe what we could plan to do is have the committee get started on evaluating the projects so that you're comfortable, that you have enough information, and then we can have an initial conversation the same night that we have him back, and then complete the work in a subsequent meeting.
Perfect.
Sure.
Sounds good.
Okay.
I have a question. And,
Go ahead, Steve.
you know, I look at the total amount that's listed for DPW in fiscal 24. It adds up to over $11 million. And besides this issue and the school issue and the fire department stuff, I mean, ultimately, if I recall, we were using a certain percentage of the annual budget as to what would ultimately be recommended by the Capital Expenditures Planning Committee. You know, and these numbers are just so astronomical. I appreciate the fact that all these things are out there to do, but I think we need some more instruction as to what we're going to do when we're looking at $20 million worth of requests for fiscal 24. So I don't know, Kim, what you can do about that question, but I need some help.
Do I recall correctly that by widening the scope of what we were looking at, we've actually stepped away from the formula, which was sort of like how much free cash we should give to these projects, that now it's more of a macro look, that the numbers, we're not supposed to think about the numbers because it's the finance team's job. It's our job to assess the merits and the finance team's job to figure out which of the funding buckets it fits in. Am I remembering that correctly from last year as we're evolving the process?
You are. Yes.
Yay, me.
Well, the only thing I would say about that is obviously a $50,000 charge and the consequences of it versus a $4.2 million item. I don't think you can evaluate those things in the same way on simple merits, because the 50 grand you can probably do almost any time, but the 4.2 really needs input from the overall finances of the town as to how you do it. So I don't know. You know, certainly we can run with what we had last year, but I'm not sure that, you know, without additional guidance that it's going to be all that good, because we have such a wide range of projects that, you know, in my own mind, every single one that we've heard has merit. So again, how do you do it? Wing it,
I think we're building up to that, because in the past we didn't even know what the universe of projects. We had a much narrower focus, and I think as we now are starting to see what the complete, you know, those are pretty big dollars, and now that we can identify what the needs are, there needs to be some discussion around how do we start to message the funding of those needs and identifying, you know, what's critical. How do we start to look at the needs that have been identified against our debt schedule and where we can slot things in for borrowing? So, Steve, I think you're right. It's a different view and approach than we've taken in the past. And I think this is I mean, I know we had started to build it. I think this year we have far more information than we had last year, i.e. we're seeing much bigger dollar signs, but we're pulling in a lot more. And now we have to figure out how do we layer the funding pieces that go with that.
Yeah, the other whack is that, you know, past bonds, you know, in the 1.9, 2.2, somewhere in there, I'm suspecting that any future borrows are going to be in the order of 6 or 7%, at least in the next couple of years. So again, you know, the merits of the process to put all this stuff on the table is a very good thing, but you know, as a taxpayer, it scares the hell out of me as to what the impact of all this is going to be. And that's partly because every one of these things has a need and a time. You know, we've sort of waited on vehicles and other things to squeeze the very last squeak out of them, so that, you know, if we're looking at, I forgot, one of them was 1990 vehicle. I mean, it's certainly time. So anyway, like I said, I find this really hard this time, because I don't think you can compare the small ones to the big ones the way we used to. So any advice would be very welcome.
Thanks, Steve.
I feel like now, like we used to have a goal of like, we put together article, what is it, 8 or 9 with all A, B, C, D, E, F, you know, and we say we want to spend all this. And that was kind of the goal of the committee. And now I feel like that's a really tiny part of, you know, it's an important part of what we're doing, but it's also asking the questions that guide when is something going to be brought to town meeting as an article on its own merits? When is something going to be sent out for a grant application? When is, so like, I feel like now we're juggling a bunch of different tasks. And I think we're still working our way through how we're going to contribute.
I think that's right, Lisa. And I don't have an answer there, and I think we'll work through it. But I do think, though, that the first part is still very important. It's still the, you know, a main piece of this committee is, and I think the free cash stuff still stands. The fiscal policies still stand, to the comment that was made before about that percentage. I think that still exists. We're just, as you stated and Kim said, we're just broadening a whole host of things here. And I think we have to figure out review of that, how much is necessary, what we should do, reporting, I think, as Kim said. So I think there's still work to be done. I think the good part is here, and Steve brought it up, is it identifies a lot of stuff going on, and a lot of money being spent, and I think tracking it, you know, in one way is good, but I think, as you said, understanding what our role is for certain of these things, like, do we need to spend any time on the Otis Street corridor because it's been, you know, evaluated through multiple other departments, so it's really not something that we're going to opine on per se, but maybe just report on. So Kim, question for you then, and maybe you said this before and I missed and I apologize, but what's the timing again that you'll get this out to us, and then what should we be contemplating for next set of meetings?
So I anticipate having something to you before the holiday. So Wednesday, I'd like to get you the updated Excel summary sheets. And that was my question for you all, the 4 of you who are here, the potential of setting a meeting maybe mid Wednesday to Thursday of next week, which would be the 30th or December 1st. If you need more time.
I'd prefer Thursday, but I can make Wednesday work if I need to.
And I guess my question is that sufficient time? If you had,
I think the timing's sufficient. Unfortunately, I am away. I have a work offsite Wednesday through Friday, so I'm away Wednesday and Thursday night.
Okay.
Unfortunately, but someone can step in, as even though we don't have a vice chair, someone can step in, Lisa, and run the meeting for me.
Duly noted.
I guess just thinking through, I'm looking out to the time frame. The budget's due December 21st, so I'm kind of working backwards from that. If the following Monday night, does that work? Which would be
the first, second, third,
fourth, fifth.
Fourth, fifth. I think that should be fine for me.
Kim, can I confirm what the deliverable is, so to speak, for Monday for the next meeting? Knowing that we're going to review everything that you share, is this where we go through and do our ratings as well, and we send that back to you and that gets compiled,
Yes.
or am I jumping the gun here?
Nope, I think that's where we're at, with the understanding that there may be some things that you're looking for more information on, specifically from Chris Payant. And we can potentially whatever you're feeling comfortable and able to rate, go ahead and do those ratings. And then we potentially have Chris back to that meeting to follow up on any things that are outstanding related to DPW.
I mean, I guess
Kim, as
just look,
part of the process, then the information that we would be using to rank will be the updated Excel spreadsheet that you're talking about for Wednesday this week.
Yes, that would be correct.
Okay.
yeah, can we, I mean, maybe we send something out. I mean, if you wanted to go a day earlier, I could do the 29th, but that again cuts down on time that we have. That following week, though, you mentioned, I mean, Monday, I could do, I have trustees of soldiers memorial meeting that night, but that's usually a pretty quick meeting, but
What time is, I'm flexible. I can move the meeting earlier. I can move the meeting later.
I think we're scheduled, I have it on my calendar, we're scheduled for 6. I just got to double check that. But I think it probably, just looking at the agenda that I saw proposed today, it's probably only like a half-hour meeting that we have. We just have a couple updates to work on. So if we
Andrew,
did that
do you
night,
know
you'd do
if-
it like 6:30.
Andrew, is AFC meeting that night, December 5th? It rings a bell.
It is, yes, at 7 o'clock.
7 o'clock, okay.
And I believe that's follow-up for the library chinwag that's happening like a couple of days later.
How early are,
Friday night at the bar? Anyone?
Friday night works for me.
I'll be at the bar. I don't know about doing
Good
our
for
thing,
you,
but yeah. How about the Tuesday, Wednesday that week?
I've
So
got
the
to check
6th.
and find out what school committee is. I'm doing that now, so I'll be able to answer that question, I hope.
So
I'm just
Tuesday,
like-
December 6th?
Yeah, Tuesday the 6th or Wednesday the 7th, I have free on my calendar because, yeah, our selectmen's meeting is not till the 13th, I believe. Our select board meeting.
Correct.
I can make either of those work.
Okay.
I'm good.
And I'm sorry, Ian, you said your meeting on the 5th,
Fifth.
at 6 or 6:30?
I think it's at 6 is what I have in my calendar right now,
Okay.
but we'd be done by 6:30. But then it sounds like Andrew's got
AFC at
AFC
7.
at 7.
Okay. Why don't we go with December 6th?
Okay.
If for any reason that appears, I'll talk with Christy. I just want to make sure from a timing standpoint, everything's lining up for the budget. I think we should be good with that. If we needed to scramble, I guess I want to give people sufficient time to really look through everything and do the ratings. So I feel like it'd be too rushed to try to meet on Tuesday.
Yep. No, I agree. And I apologize.
No, don't.
I can,
We have a couple of folks who aren't here tonight. Leah had let me know. So I think after she watches the meeting, she's been at the other 2 meetings, she'll have the ability. So I want to just give time for anybody who needs to watch anything they've missed as well.
sometimes this
So
work thing
Tuesday,
gets,
December 6th.
yep. 6 p.m.
Yep. And do you prefer to do that remotely again?
For sure.
I would, because I have another Zoom meeting that starts at 7 that I can be late for. It's personal, not town related, but I can show up late, but it's much easier for me to do that if I'm still sitting on my couch for both of them.
Perfect. All right.
I am fine either way, so remote works fine.
Okay. We can do remote.
Okay.
Great.
Perfect.
Okay, so Tuesday, December 6th, 6 p.m. remote. In the meantime, I will get out the updated Excel file with the project rating, set it up so you can drop your ratings in. I'll compile everything and we'll start to have that discussion, and we'll see if we can conclude everything on the 6th. If there's anything, the other piece I just want to mention, so this is sort of the budget piece. We get a capital budget, recommended capital budget. It goes into the document. And then as there are budget hearings and things get refined in January and February ahead of March town meeting, things do change. So we would like to circle back and have another meeting so that a meeting or maybe two, so that when we get to town meeting in March, what's being presented as capital, this committee actually is truly backing what's being presented. Okay,
That's
right.
good.
thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.
Do we need a motion to adjourn?
I will take that.
Perhaps. So moved.
Is there a second?
Second,
Okay, roll call vote. Lisa,
Blazeski, yes.
Andrew,
Bradley, yes.
Steve,
Durrett, yes.
and Johnson, yes. So 4-0 for being present. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks,
for reminding me.
everybody.
Thanks. I'd
Thank
hate to
you.
stay in session for like the next week, you know?
Yeah, that would be good.
Take
We'll be at
care.
the bar. We'll be at
Happy
the bar, right?
Thanksgiving, everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Good night, all.
Yes, happy
Good night.
Thanksgiving. Take care.